Hey dudes, sorry about the delay on this video. This was supposed to be the month of Street Fighter, but for some reason, for reasons I can't really remember or recall, I just couldn't get it done in time. I don't know what event could have transpired to delay this video so long, but hopefully you'll forgive me and we can just move along. Thanks. I think there is a difference between your first Street Fighter game and your first Street Fighter game that you actually get into. And I think everyone has that Street Fighter that was the version that really opened them up to Street Fighter and maybe fighting games in general. I played Street Fighter 2 and the many versions that came with it, but I think I was too young to really understand the ins and outs of it completely. But for Street Fighter Alpha 2, that was the game that seriously made me appreciate what Street Fighter was. The Alpha series in general was a huge change in direction for the entirety of Street Fighter. The art took on a more anime style. This would result in characters looking a little softer, but with a style all its own. It would give us Ken's iconic long hair, as well as cementing a babyface look for Ryu before he would go on to get his gruff look, which I both really love. And personal opinion here, but this is my favorite outfit for Chun-Li, period. Art style wouldn't be the only change, as nearly every aspect of the game would be worked over. Alpha 1 had already given us some new characters like Rose and Sodom, but 2 would fill out the roster with new characters like Sakura and the returning characters like Zangief and even Gen from the original Street Fighter. Gen would also go on to become one of my favorite characters of all time.
You a big fool.
And Sakura may have just been one of my first video game crushes. The tomboy features, the spunky attitude, the moveset, come on. The fighting system would also take a pretty drastic change as 2 huge mechanics would be implemented. The ability to use different levels of super move, and the ability to speed up one's character, which would make for some of the most insane and outright broken combos imaginable. The super art level system would go on to be implemented into later games, but the speed ability has definitely been adjusted or outright faded from Street Fighter's existence, which may be for the best. It was all of this that really hooked me into the Street Fighter series, and still remains one of my favorite installments of all time. The variations of super arts and really the smooth flow of Alpha 2 really taught me how Street Fighter and fighting games work. It was one of the first fighting games I truly devoted time to, simply because it was so fun and I wanted to learn more about it in general. This could very well have been the first Street Fighter game for many simply because of its vast availability, with versions spanning from the PS1 to the Sega Saturn and astonishingly enough, the Super Nintendo. This version was the one I was the most familiar with. If anyone wants to argue that this is the most inferior version, I could see why. But to me, the SNES version is my favorite version. The fact that this game was even able to run on the Super Nintendo hardware is nothing short of a miracle. There was a lot packed into this game, and it really showed. There were unique background animations you get for winning with a super art, to all the beautifully animated backgrounds, and even the minute details like some characters having unique animations with each other. I feel like the effort was put into Street Fighter Alpha 2 from top to bottom, and it really shows, both in its quality and the SNES's performance handling all Alpha 2 had. I know it's my favorite version, but I can stack papers neatly before I have to pick up a controller to start the next fight again. And of course, this meant that the SNES version is a bit sluggish in performance. It definitely feels good, but you can tell that this could be going a little faster. For example, this game plays with turbo mode, and when you switch to a port of the arcade version, you can see a considerable difference. But to me, I think that this little weight added to the Super Nintendo version had a positive impact. For one, you could tell when characters are supposed to be faster than others. For example, Guy here had a swifter movement than a lot of the other characters here, as opposed to the Switch port where every character feels ridiculously fast. I have no doubt that Alpha 2 Gold probably took this to the next level, but for me, this is what I grew up with, and I think there were some good lessons learned, just because of the speed this version was running at. Performance aside, it's all the features and flavor Alpha adds that really makes the series feel all its own. The addition of the Alpha characters are some of the best that has ever been, and this is further supported by just how many times you see Alpha characters make a return in later installments. They were characters done right, and trust me, we will get into examples of this a bit later. If there is one thing that Street Fighter does right, it's the backgrounds of stages. I know I mentioned they are all well animated, but no, seriously, just take some time to appreciate everything going on in these stages. You've got this fighter jet hovering around while the two of you duke it out, which must sound awful, by the way. You've got this gross bathroom scene that is all still surprisingly well animated for being such a closed off area. And apparently you could even just get into a fight during Eliza's birthday party. Look at everyone who showed up. You've got Strider and Morrigan, and even Felicia is having a dip. Felicia was also an awakening as a kid, that definitely didn't bleed over into current day life. But the most glorious stage has to belong to the bonus stage in Alpha 2. Everything about this stage is just so good. The ferocity of the storm that slams around the players as they fight in the vast open field, and to think it's mostly reserved for a fight between Ryu and Sagat makes this all the better. At this point, tensions are high for these two characters, and I can't think of a more perfect stage for them to fight in. It's just fantastic. And it goes without saying that the music is phenomenal, but this is usually expected of any of the titles. There are definitely some favorites of the bunch like Sakura's theme, Rose's theme, and of course I feel this particular Ken theme has been a favorite of many for a long time. Every stage carries a pretty good theme, as it should, as it's a Street Fighter title. If you're a fan of Street Fighter, I implore you to go back and just try out Street Fighter Alpha 2. Not just 2, but every one of them. Personally, I don't think too much of the original, and 3 deserves a video all its own. But Alpha 2 and the series in general played a monumental part in the overall development of the Street Fighter franchise. Nearly every later installment has at least taken notes from the Alpha formula and strives to keep that type of quality alive. Maybe not in 5, I don't know man, I didn't play that one. The gameplay felt much more refined in these series, be it in the momentum and movement, or just mixing in the levels of power each super move can hold during a fight, even to just how fleshed out every character feels. 2 in particular has a nice array of charge characters, zoners, and Shoto characters, and each type of character feels different enough from every other character of the same genre. Sakura doesn't feel like Ryu, Ryu doesn't feel like Ken, and it's the potential every character has that makes every fight a challenge, which has always been a big factor in Street Fighter as a whole. But the roster Alpha 2 has feels like one of the most iconic to date, giving you lots of potential to work through arcade mode again and again. And as perfect as I do feel this game is, there really is a bit of input rating in arcade mode. But it wouldn't be Street Fighter if you didn't get at least a little frustrated at characters that don't exist. When it comes down to it, whatever your favorite Street Fighter is the right answer, because every Street Fighter is its own experience, and while I may not label Alpha 2 as my absolute favorite, it is the one I owe the most to. My deep love of Street Fighter would not have been without my time diving deep into the world of Street Fighter Alpha 2. It really is part of the series that everyone should experience. And while I think it might honestly be a different experience for everyone, I think it is definitely a game that needs to be experienced. Also, hey, I unlocked the secret Akuma fight first try without thinking about it when I was recording, and I just wanted to let you know that he absolutely destroyed me. I mean, it was devastating. Thanks for watching. Thanks for watching my video on Street Fighter Alpha 2. I'd love to know what your...
Here comes a new challenger.
So make your choice right. Select and make your first pick. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Choose and pick the best one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Enough of your yammering about Alpha 2 and how much it meant to your childhood. It's time to talk about the actual best game in the Street Fighter series, Street Fighter 3 Third Strike! Take it from someone who's been playing Street Fighter almost as long as you've been alive. This is the best fighting game ever. Hands down, everyone agrees. It has everything. Challenging new characters, refined old favorites, liquid smooth animation, stunning backgrounds, and a banging soundtrack. The beats in my head! Sorry about that. That just comes out sometimes. But the game is just so good. The technical expertise and challenge built into the gameplay is next level. Disagree? Well, allow me to retort. Feel dumb now? Yeah, You bet you do. This moment is just one of the reasons this game is still considered to be a pinnacle of the fighting game scene, and the one that every new fighting game or entry in the Street Fighter series is judged against. And they are all found wanting. This game is so good that years later it was updated and re-released just so people could take advantage of modern consoles' online features to play online. And that's all they changed. They just made it work online. You don't mess with perfection. And you also don't mess with the Fun Sphere Game Club. Check out our podcast on Spotify. See ya!
Well, thanks for that, bro. A bit over the top, but well, he's not wrong. Sometimes to reach the top, you've got to hit the bottom, and I think no game reflects that sentiment better than Street Fighter Third Strike. To me, Third Strike still feels, after all this time, like the ultimate Street Fighter experience a person can have. But to get to that point, to get to where Street Fighter Third Strike is, it had to fall to a point where Street Fighter was almost done entirely. We've got to go all the way back to 1997 Street Fighter 3 New Generation. I'd argue that Street Fighter Third Strike, Fight for the Future, and Street Fighter 3 New Generation have the most accurate subtitles of all time. Street Fighter 3 New Generation was just that, a new generation of fighters, a full roster of fresh faces. From Elena to Dudley, every character in the roster was a new one save for Ken and Ryu. And while some of these characters would go down to be some of the most iconic characters in the entire series, this choice to remove all the old fighters did not receive well. The choice to do away with all the old iconic fighters was only the first negative mark this game would get. While this game did feature some fantastic sprite work and would see the setting return to its urban roots unlike its alpha counterpart, the combination of 2D fighters slowly losing popularity along with the arcade scene as a whole starting to fade from existence really did not bode well for the Street Fighter series. And it's not hard to believe that just how much Street Fighter was out there may have led to this installment adding to the oversaturation of Street Fighter as a whole. Despite this, there would be more versions of this game, slowly refining and repairing some of the damage the previous entries had done. We'd see the return of some more classic characters, as well as an effort to tie all these characters together in their own way. But it wouldn't be until Third Strike that things would finally start to change. But this was a change that would take years to achieve. While console releases were usually the norm, Third Strike had a bit of a weird lineup, being released a year after the arcade for the Dreamcast. The ill-fated console didn't help get this game out there, and it wouldn't be until 2004 when the PS2 and eventually the Xbox would get its own release. And this would be where things started to change. This would also be my first experience with the game as a whole. This would also be another instance where I became obsessed with Street Fighter for a long time. What my brother was trying to show you was definitely a viral moment for Street Fighter, which would lead to many more players trying to come in and replicate what they saw. But a parry isn't so easily done, with the user needing to tap a forward input or down input when being attacked in the air within 10 frames of contact of the opponent's attack. To think that someone online had done this so many times during a special move is insane. Just a short time later, an online version of Third Strike would come out, and finally this game would be getting the recognition it truly deserves. Along with its parry system, we'd see a lot of quality that was truly years in the making. Third Strike may have not been the game to invent all of these mechanics, but it was certainly the game to refine them. The movement feels smooth as silk, the sprite work remains my favorite of all time. There is something you can appreciate every time you play, from the movement of Ken, Ryu, and Akuma's gi to the slow breathing of Makoto. Really, every character just comes off feeling alive. Except for maybe Q, he's kinda scary. The backgrounds and locations are some of the most interesting around, really capturing that return to the urban settings, as well as traveling all over the world. It's really one of the finest examples of just how much life Capcom breathes into their backgrounds. Even this weird stage that I think is Hugo's? It's weird, but every time you do a hard knockdown, stuff around the room bounces, and that's pretty neat, right? With that, we have some truly iconic characters. Dudley and Elena being two terrific characters both in personality and performance. They are truly characters I get excited to hear announced in later games, but that's not the case for everyone, and I think that's where Third Strike can fall a little short. Sorry Josh, there are some great ones, but there are also some not so great ones. But I will say, Alex in general is probably an all-time favorite. He was kind of the flagship character for the Street Fighter 3 series, and I think in design and gameplay, he is fantastic. Just really a standout to the flagships you'd normally see. Kind of a Shoto grappler mix that really stands out to me. But then you get to characters like 12, and you get Necro, and you get Remy. These are these kind of characters that are like replacements for other characters that don't quite live up to the hype of previous characters. Like Remy's design, don't like him over Guile and probably never will. I'd love to see him return, but just not as a carbon copy of Guile. I think Street Fighter 6 personally could do some serious work with him in an overhaul, but I'm not ever going to hate not seeing 12 or Necro back. Something else this game had was its music. Not the overall sound quality, because if you go back and listen to some of the earlier ports, it's bad, like really bad. But the stage themes are perfectly done. Each stage has a theme and each round you play adds more to that theme. So if you were a 1-1 fight going into the third round, you're rewarded with the full intensity of the song. It's really something that does a lot to get both players more into the fight. These themes carry this hip-hop inspired motif and really calls back to Street Fighter's beginnings. It's an aesthetic that I think Street Fighter does well and is something that feels more natural for the overall series. Like I said before, Street Fighter music rarely misses, and Third Strike might just have the most legendary soundtrack in the series. It's one of the magical moments in fighting games where every aspect of the game blends together to make a masterpiece. The art style looks so good and keeps the consistent look throughout each stage. The characters look well overlaid into the background that makes it feel like a natural setting, no matter which stage you're in, and the music just ties it all together. Honestly, all that's left is just to enjoy the combat, which still, to me, has no equal. Look, I'm loving Street Fighter 6 a bunch, but I don't think it's enough to hit the levels Third Strike does. What always amazes me about Street Fighter and fighting games in general is despite how it's always the same format, you always find something new from each experience. You're constantly learning and experiencing new things every time you play, finding out which moves blend with other moves, and finding out which combos and attacks you can seamlessly blend together. And this is why Third Strike is so popular even now. From learning the game yourself to watching high-level players, you'll find yourself and even them seeing new things when they play. What you can parry, how to utilize wake-ups, there is so much out there to experiment with even now. I think it speaks volumes that I can take the same character and play through arcade mode, and having a different experience than the last time I used the character. Plus Third Strike is just such a pleasant game to come back to every now and then. A little frustrating too, the difficulty curve in arcade mode can fluctuate, especially with Gil. He is a boss that can easily parry anything you have and read nearly any input when he wants to becoming a brainless opponent that doesn't seem to know how to block anymore. It's frustrating but also a little funny just to see how much the difficulty can shift. Despite my brother's usual poor taste, he is right about this one. To me, and I guess to him, Street Fighter Third Strike really is the best Street Fighter of all time. And if you disagree, well, good. I encourage people telling me their favorite Street Fighter. But for me, Third Strike checks every box a fighting game should have. The roster, combat, and overall look of the game is why I feel Third Strike will always be, and to a lesser extent my brother's, favorite fighting game of all time. Thanks for watching. For real this time. Hey friends, thanks for watching this lengthy video talking about some really old, really fun fighting games. Big thanks for my brother for putting in some thoughts of his own, and if you want to hear more of his bad takes, he's got a podcast by the name of Fun Sphere Game Club. I won't lie, it's pretty good. I check in on every episode. If you like this video, consider leaving a like and subscribe if you're new. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and keep it practical.